and be ready to go. On the Move with Palisa Tawo and Benjamin Mushatama.
Hey, it's 11 minutes past 9 o'clock Central African time. Let's start with our first conversation for today's show. We're speaking about retirement age because it seems like there's a big dispute in South Africa's Constitutional Court. And what makes it complicated is that there was a recent split judgment of a particular case where employers were saying, well, you know what, we're encountering something very unique here. They were dismissing employees on the basis that they reached the agreed or normal retirement age. And the case before the court was saying, well, you know, this is actually very much of an issue that is, you know, showing blurred lines, you know, whether the dismissal of various employees who continued working beyond their retirement age was automatically unfair under South Africa's Labour Relations Act. In deciding the question, the Constitutional Court had to decide between interpretations of the retirement age defence set in the LRA, which is the Labour Relations Act, which essentially allows an employer to fairly dismiss an employee if they've reached the normal or agreed upon retirement age. We unpack this. What are the best practices for ensuring fairness in the workplace when handling retirement-related discussions and decisions? We have Justin Hatting, who's a senior legal advisor at Strata-g Labour Solutions. Thank you so much, Justin, for joining us here on Channel Africa.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I mean, why is this a contested issue? Because one would have thought that the law is clear and it is what it is. When you reach a particular age, you can be easily dismissed.
Yeah, so ultimately I think the confusion comes in where there's actually no mandated or legislated retirement age within South Africa. So when we find ourselves in a position where, you know, there is no mandated retirement age, we need to now start looking at what the contract of employment says, or if there's a policy or procedure in place within that particular workplace. And if there isn't, then we start looking at industry norms and standards. And then the problem you find when people, you know, have this discussion about retirement age and the possibility of being dismissed based on their age, we also then start getting into very tricky ground where there might even be the possibility of someone being dismissed because of their age. It goes off to courts. It's found to be automatically unfair, and then there's 24 months of compensation. So there's an absolute minefield that we're discussing today.
And so what are those considerations that should be made? Because if there are those blurred lines, it probably makes it difficult for the employer to make a certain decisive decision. Yeah,
so ultimately there have been a few court cases that have come out recently where they've basically said, well, you know, Section 187 of the Labour Relations Act says, you know, persons can be dismissed based on their age if they've reached that normal agreed on retirement age. But now the thing is, as I said, we need to also make sure that when we do dismiss someone based on that, it is for a fair reason, obviously, so they've reached that retirement age, and then ultimately there's a fair procedure that's followed. And, you know, as I said, the difficulty is sometimes there isn't that agreed retirement age, so now you need to start having the discussion with someone prior to, you know, what you feel is time for them to move on, time to start making provision for younger people to come in and ultimately have that agreement. If you now allow someone to work past the agreed retirement age or, you know, the normal retirement age, the thing is what used to happen in the past, people would argue, well, a new contract of employment has come into place, a new agreement has come into place with regards to my retirement age. So it's very, very important that we keep mind of this before we start taking that action.
Let's go back to this particular case in terms of the conflicting interpretations. What do you see as a conflict here, and why do you think there was this huge split in terms of not having a certain verdict?
Yeah, so I think the problem that we have here is because of the fact that, well, we say, okay, there is an agreed retirement age, you've moved past that, and ultimately the employer reserves the right to dismiss you based on reaching that retirement age at any point after that. The other difficulty is, as I said, you know, when you allow someone to work past that retirement age, you haven't had the discussion with them, you then start creating an expectation that, well, yes, I'm now allowed to continue indefinitely. There's a new employment relationship that comes into place, and there is a new agreed retirement age. So that's where it came in, and that's where the sort of disagreement came, and there was that split judgment.
In fact, when you're dealing with something like this, the considerations must be made by the employer. So communicating the labor laws on time would be a prerequisite. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So I think the first and foremost, the main thing is that there needs to be clear policies in place. So employers need to start saying, well, within our business, your age of retirement is 65 as per your contract of employment. And we also have a retirement policy that's going to set up what's going to happen when you start reaching that age. So, for instance, we'll start having conversations and discussions with you prior to, you reaching that age, maybe 1 month before. We'll give you an opportunity to make your submissions. Ultimately, we don't want to be in a situation where we create these expectations. Let's have some clarity. So if we need you to work past your retirement age, what we're going to do is offer you a fixed-term contract. And the reason for that would be obviously so you can capacitate your successors, and we can then go through our succession planning. So it's really, really about being clear and communicating on time.
And what would the responsibility of the employee be in this case, knowing that contractually there is an age limitation there? Would they also have a responsibility to consult with a line manager or the business they fall under?
Absolutely. So, it really is, as I said before, a whole situation where we need to start talking. Both parties need to be heard. We need to make sure that everyone knows what's going to happen on the day that Justin turns 65, and then what's going to happen after that, so we can put things in place. Because it's not good enough for an employee then to sit there knowing that this age is coming up. They say nothing, they hope nothing gets said, and then ultimately there's a bit of conflict and a dispute arises afterwards when the employer eventually now starts saying, okay, well, we'd like to remind you this is the situation and we need to start making provision.
Do you think the retirement age is still a fair reality in your way of seeing things, Justin? Because over time, you're starting to see people having the capacity to actually continue their careers until a later time in their careers. What's your take overall when you look at just the changes in the work landscape?
So ultimately, I think, as you said, with advances in medical science, people are living longer. They're not getting sick. They're not suffering from terminal illnesses anymore. So they are able to work past that 65. Also, what we need to understand is because of current economic realities and the fact that people do in South Africa traditionally join the job market late because we have such a large youth cohort within our population, what needs to happen is people need to then make provision for that, because also, people aren't able to save because of economic realities. They need to work past it. So we need to make provision for that, but also balance it with the fact that we need to get youth into the job market. Because if we look at real retirement age in South Africa, according to economists, it's actually 80 these days. People need to be able to supplement their savings and their retirement incomes way past 65. So we need to make sure that we have those discussions. If we are going to allow people to move past retirement age, let's put them on those fixed-term contracts so that they can work, say, another 10 years or whatever it might be, and they understand, okay, well, the reason for this is I have skills that my employer needs. I need to pass those on, and I'm here to assist with that succession planning. So I think there's a balance that needs to be struck.
Justin, stay there on the line. We'll continue after this break. We're speaking to Justin Hatting, Senior Legal Advisor at Strata-g Labor Solutions. We're unpacking the best practices for ensuring fairness in the workplace when handling retirement-related discussions, especially when it comes to that normal retirement age. But we're contextualizing it from a South African perspective.
Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a